Well, look, I think the real question is not when there's a Taiwan contingency, will there have any other countries try to come to rescue us? But I think the real question is how are we going to prevent a conflict or any conflict from happening? I think that is what we are trying to do.
You're listening to the USSC Briefing Room, a podcast from the United States Study Center at the University of Sydney, where we give you a seat at the table for a USSC briefing on the latest developments in U.S. news and foreign policy. We'll cover what you need to know and what's beneath the surface of the news.
Welcome to another episode of the Briefing Room. My name is Jared Monshine. I'm the Director of Research here at the U.S. Study Center. And before we get started, I want to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. So today we are honored to be joined by Representative Hsu, who is the Taiwanese representative to Australia based in Canberra. He arrived in Canberra 4 months ago, and he was kind enough to join us for an event at the U.S. Study Center where we discussed Taiwan's upcoming election. And it's particularly great that we get to have him with us because not only does he obviously know Taiwan, but he also has worked for a couple decades, more than a couple decades, in the United States and on the United States.
I'm old enough.
And so I wanted to have a discussion with him today about not only the election and how it's being perceived outside in Taiwan and outside of Taiwan, but also some of the broader issues on Taiwan. But before we get started, I just want to confirm that you have a stat or figure to share with us at the end of this. Is that all right?
Yes, I try my best.
Great, sounds good. So before we even get to questions about Taiwan, I guess one thing that we should flag is I introduce you as the representative from Taiwan. Usually the most senior government representative from a foreign government is an ambassador. How has Taiwan's unique status affected your work as a diplomat? Do you just get invited to less parties in Canberra than the ambassadors?
Well, that is a very good question. That is also a fun part of being a Taiwanese foreign service officers, because we, in most cases, we do not have this kind of a formal diplomatic tie with many countries. For example, my previous post in Washington or in Boston, the same status. We do not have like a diplomatic passport. We don't use diplomatic visa to enter the border. However, I think that is, just a kind of like a formalities. Actually, we are doing exactly the same thing. Any diplomats around the world are doing, because we work with the government officials, we work with the think tank, we work with the members of parliament to promote the awareness of the Taiwan issues. So in Canberra, I have no obstacles getting in touch with like a member of parliament. I also work with colleagues and counterparts at the DFAT to convey our message. I also work with other ambassadors from different embassies in Canberra. So, with all that, I invited to less parties in Canberra, maybe because officially I'm not a member of the diplomatic corps. So for those official settings, I'm not able to attend. However, I think overall I can get my things done in Canberra.
Great. So it's just been 4 months or so that you've been in Australia, but what's your perception of how Taiwan is perceived in Australia? What do you think your average Australian thinks of Taiwan, and do you think it maybe differs from the way that Americans think about Taiwan?
Yes. Well, I think of course Australia and United States is two different countries. So you have different political systems, you have a different culture, you have a different composition of population, among others. So I cannot apply what I learned in the United States here in Australia 100%. But I think, fortunately enough, I think Australia and Taiwan are like-minded countries. So we share a lot of value together. And that is also something that we can, base on to develop a meaningful or significant partnership. So I think overall speaking, Australians' perception about Taiwan is a trading partner. But I think in the past few years, we saw Australian government is more likely to play a proactive roles in the Indo-Pacific region, and Taiwan is a important stakeholder in this region. So to interact with Taiwan will make a lot of sense for Australia. So I think that maybe it's a question of this bottle is half empty or half full. If you see there's rooms for the bilateral relations to develop, of course you can work on that. So I am very optimistic about this bilateral partnerships, and I hope that we can see some development in the future.
One argument that I find some people make, especially in the academic world, is talking about in strategic competition is something between China and the U.S. and all the other nations don't really matter that much. And I think, in my view, that sort of removes the agency from not only major powers like India, Japan, et cetera, but also from independent democratic countries like Taiwan. Do you feel like Taiwan is its agency and its views are overlooked, or do you feel like it's sort of treated like a pawn in strategic competition in the way people talk about it?
No, I think that maybe we have to admit that we are all in this together because we live in the same world. And yes, indeed, I've heard that people perceive Taiwan as a pawn of U.S.-China relations. But as a foreign service officer of Taiwan who has been in dealing with the United States for more than 2 decades, I can confidently say that it is a wrong perception. I think that over the years, United States understand that Taiwan is important partners. So they are willing to work with Taiwan on Taiwan's own merit. So that was the reason that in the past few years, you saw there are new initiatives being brought up. It's not just based on the strategic competition things, but I think they saw the value of Taiwan being a partner of the United States. So they are willing to work with Taiwan on the education, science and technology collaboration, trade-related, Coast Guard cooperation to increase the capability of HADRs, among others. I think those are the issues that, because the United States understand that Taiwan is an important partner.
You touched on this, but I think whether it be Japan or India or Korea, there seems to be, in my view, Canberra has more interest and support for deepening its relationships with U.S. friends, allies, and partners around the region. Do you see, or do you feel like there's an increased appetite for engagement in Canberra with Taiwan?
Well, just like you say, I've been in this position for 4 months, and I think the life in Canberra was really interesting. And I can very confidently say to you that I feel that I'm warmly welcomed in Canberra. In the past 4 months, I've already met with more than 60 members of parliament. I talk with my counterpart at the administration frequently. I engage with ambassadors and other senior colleagues in other embassies and talk about the issues, regional issues. So I think that, I don't think Canberra has less appetite to engage with Taiwan, but I think that because Australia have its own one China policies, and but of course it is not just like treating Taiwan the same level as Australia treating other allies or regional partners. Yeah.
I don't, as a diplomat and as someone who's talked to you and realize you're an impressive one, I don't need you to comment on Taiwanese politics, but it still would be great to get your thoughts on the election, of what you do or are willing to share with us. Do you think, if the leading candidate from the DPP party, which would be a continuation of the current government, the leader's term limited right now, and so they're looking at another DPP candidate to succeed her. Do you think that if DPP loses, that somehow that's a sea change in Taiwan's policies? Some might say that what Taiwan saw with Hong Kong, the way that Xi Jinping treated it, has changed Taiwan's thinking on its alignment with Beijing. Where do you see the outcome of the election having an impact?
Well, I think that this is going to be our 8th direct presidential election that we're going to have next January. I think that Taiwan's democracy is resilient enough to face all kinds of challenges. And also, I think along the way, Taiwanese voters also, majority of Taiwanese voters, we share the same view. We want to have a peaceful and stable Taiwan and prosperous Taiwan as well. So I think the voters' hope is the same. So no matter who become our next president, I think that our policy will still remain the same, especially on the foreign policy. I've been in this foreign service for more than 20 years, and I think that, along the way, through different administration in Taiwan, I think, for example, our relation with United States, we basically work on increase Taiwan's participation in the international organization or get rid of the restriction that's been set for interacting with United States officials, or signing a free trade agreement with the United States, and more like a security commitment from the United States. Those are the basic things that never changed throughout the different administrations. So basically, the hope of Taiwanese voters about Taiwanese future is the same. And the policies we conduct the foreign affairs are the same along the way.
Great. Talking about things that are the same or maybe different, the Trans-Pacific Partnership has taken quite a journey and is now the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, and it now also does not include the U.S. But Taiwan has expressed some interest in joining it, and Taiwan also, at least in my view, has a really interesting bilateral negotiation going on with the U.S. right now on trade. And in my view, I think they might actually provide some sort of model for others in the region in terms of getting the U.S. to engage in the region on trade more than they have elsewhere. What is the messaging that Canberra is giving you about Taiwan joining CPTPP? Because I think you need consensus. You need all of the members to agree to let you in. Where is Taiwan on that? They have expressed interest. Is that right?
Well, I think that, as I said, Taiwan is an important trading partner of Australia. So, definitely Australia is the country that we turn to when we officially submit our CPTPP application. So the message we got from Australia government is always the same at this moment, because apparently all the CPTPP members just conclude the first round of accessions review and welcome UK becoming next CPTPP members. And they haven't had the consensus about how, when to start the second round of reviewing of those applicants. So I think that Australian government hasn't speak out loud about their attitude of welcoming not only Taiwan, but all the second round CPTPP applicants. So I think that is basically the message I got from my counterparts with regard to the CPTPP.
Yeah, I think CPTPP and TPP just there's a lot of frustration at the lack of clarity, a lack of clarity moving forward for everyone, including the United States. One thing I want to ask you about is you're spending so much time in the U.S. We've polled the U.S. and Australia for a number of years. We've also in recent years started polling the Japanese public as well about a number of things. One thing that I'd love to ask, and that has been really enlightening for me, is we ask folks about their level of concern about the way things are working in the U.S. We ask folks whether they are very concerned, a little concerned, not at all concerned, or don't know in terms of the way that democracy in the U.S. is working, Congress's ability to do its job, the president's ability to do their job, potential political violence. And it's remarkable that Americans actually lead by a significant margin, both Australians and Japanese response in terms of their level of concern about American democracy and so forth. But, basically half or 2/3 of Americans are concerned about a number of these things, whereas Japanese respondents they're usually, in terms of very concerned, they're usually between 10 and 20%. It's like a third, if not less, in terms of those very concerned. And our CEO Mike Green says the Japanese understand that the Americans are just weird, and I'd love your take on that. Do you, with your experience in the U.S., do you find that the Taiwanese just understand U.S. politics and have a different view of it than maybe Americans do of themselves? What is the Taiwanese view of the as I like to say, the soap opera with endless episodes that is American politics?
Well, I think that Taiwanese people always interested in these U.S. related issues, and we follow U.S. politics closely, but maybe not close enough. But of course, if you're asking me, I'm following U.S. politics for 2 decades, or more than 2 decades. So I have different take than like in general public in Taiwan. I personally think that this kind of dynamics in domestic politics in the United States basically is the way to show that democracy, even though it's not a perfect system, is a resilient system. Sometimes you may be chaotic, looking from outside, but actually it has some rules to follow. And I recall that when I first was posed to Washington, D.C., that was in the early 2000s. And at that time, the first year I was there, I was fortunate enough to witness this hanging chat episode.
Oh, wow. You're really dating yourself.
Presidential election. And then we have 50-50 Congress, Senate. Yeah. So I think at that time, people worry about, okay, how can it be? I mean, for this democracy in the United States, would it be sustainable? But I think 20 years past, I think when we look back for those episodes, even though it's an endless soap opera, but I think when we look back for those episodes, we see that maybe we learn something from that. And of course, sometimes if we don't pay too much attention, we just forgot those lessons we learned. So I think the same thing or same principle apply to Taiwan's democracy. I think that, of course, everyone watching Taiwan's presidential election closely nowadays, but I think along the ways, we, Taiwanese people, ourselves also learn something from our practice of democracies. And we understand that in an election like this, which is an important election, we have to be responsible to cast our vote and let our voice be heard. And no matter what the election outcome would be, we respect the outcome of the majority people's choice, and we go from there. So that is the lesson we learned. So,
do you think the Taiwanese are more worried about a second Trump term or a second Biden term?
Well, I think that Taiwanese people, honestly, we don't worry too much about the developments of the U.S. politics. To be very honest with you, because there is a U.S. Domestic legislation, it's called Taiwan Relations Act, that was passed and become a public law of the United States back in 1979. So the bilateral...
I'll just add that the current president of the United States is one of the few guys who was actually there when it was signed.
He casted the vote and voted for Taiwan Relations Act back in the 79s. So definitely it is the cornerstone of this unofficial relations between Taiwan and United States. And along the way, 40-some years passed, but I think this bilateral relations, even though it is unofficial, but become more and more solid and have been like evolving to a different level. There are something that being a foreign service officer, maybe I can hardly imagine that will happen 20 years ago, and they are happening today. So
in terms of U.S. politics,
in terms of the U.S.-Taiwan relations. Yeah, for example, the restrictions the restriction that's been put between the Taiwanese foreign service officer, we were not allowed to enter the state-owned building for business in the past. But this kind of restriction has been loosened, lifted. So now I think those restrictions no longer exist.
Where would you meet? If you couldn't meet at the State Department?
Coffee shop.
Yeah, I was going to say literally a Starbucks.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a Starbucks, but it's a coffee shop around.
You have better taste than Starbucks.
No comment on that. But anyway, but along the way, when we have some conversation at the coffee shop, both of us, both of our side and our American friends, found that it is inappropriate to discuss that kind of issue in a coffee shop. So we start to review what will be the most reasonable ways to conduct those business. So
great. Now, one thing that a lot of people do think about when they talk about Taiwan is a hypothetical Chinese invasion of Taiwan. And we at the U.S. Study Center have been polling on this, the U.S., Australia, and Japan for a couple of years now. And one thing that I found really interesting about our poll this year is that support among Japanese respondents for sending military forces to defend Taiwan if it were invaded by China declined 9 percentage points from last year. And while 60% of Australians agree with economically isolating China in such a contingency, only 46% of Australians are willing to or eager or agree to send forces to help the U.S. defend Taiwan. Are you worried about less than half of Australians being in favor of sending troops to help defend Taiwan, and that decline in Japanese respondents about sending military forces?
Well, look, I think the real question is not when there's a Taiwan contingency, will there have any other countries try to come to rescue us? But I think the real question is how are we going to prevent a conflict or any conflict from happening? I think that is what we are trying to do. So that is also made by my president very clearly in her most recent National Days address. She said that peace is the only option. So nobody wants to see the conflict. And so no matter what the polling result is, I think we are doing what we need to do in Taiwan to increase our asymmetric capability to defend ourselves, to make Taiwan a more resilient place when we have any challenges. So I think the question is not about how many countries going to come to help Taiwan, but how are we going to prevent the conflict from happening? I think from what many countries has been doing, including the United States, Australia, in those interaction with Chinese leaders, I think Australia's Prime Minister as well as President Biden, among other global leaders, make it clear that the peace and stability in Taiwan Strait is their major concern. And they also oppose the unilateral change of the status quo in Taiwan Strait. So I think those kind of message is really important at this moment. That is also the message that can prevent the war from happening, because when Beijing try to take any action, they're probably going to think twice what going to be the cost for that.
Excellent. So we've reached the point of the episode where you share with us a stat or figure for us. Do you have one or more available?
Okay, I would like to make it more significant one and make sure my message conveyed to the audience. So there are several figures. First is half. Taiwan is only the half the size of Tasmania. So Taiwan is not a big country. However, Taiwan is the 5th largest trading partner of Australia, which means that we have a substantial trade relations. And there are 25 direct flights in between Taiwan and Australia every week. So, and it's only take about 8 hours. So Taiwan is is closer than you can imagine to Australian people. So with those kind of relations, I think Australia need to take Taiwan more seriously and make Taiwan be more relevant in their policy, in their everyday conversation.
Excellent. Well, that will close up the briefing room. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
But as we wrap up, I'd like to point out a couple of other podcasts that may be of interest. We have the CEO, Mike Green. He's co-host of the Asia Chessboard podcast with Jude Blanchette, the Freeman Chair for China Studies at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. I'd also recommend checking out the USSC Live podcast series that runs recordings from our major live events. You can find these on our brand new website, ussc.edu.au, or wherever you get your podcasts.